Okay, so I will send you a link to our documentation after this meeting, after this training. It will have all of the resources that you need. So if you have our drape ball, that you should have this in the past, then you will have our resources here, 9 centimeter drape ball, browser package, and you can download it with everything inside. What is inside is a document with our entire new workflow with all of the information inside. There is a browser file with the same drape ball in the browser file and presets and the validation template. Okay, so I will walk you through the document. First, there's a new section called calibration. This is just to make sure that your drape ball is set up in a proper way. So you should have your drape ball set up in the same position always, whether you want to mark it on your table or something like that, it should always be set up in the same position. Your camera should also be stable and set up in the same position always. This is very important. In the past, there was no requirement for your camera or for you to place your camera anywhere. This time, we want to make sure that the camera is always in the same position. There should be a camera stand or some location in which the camera has to stay in place. We recommend any DSLR or cheap camera is okay. We don't recommend taking photos with your phone because the phone will warp the photo a little bit. So we just want to take a flat image of your physical drape. Always the same position, always the same image. It always should have the same result for your drape ball and for your camera, basically. So this setup is shown to you so that you know how we have it set up in our office. You're not required to use these same distances. Your drape ball could be closer to your camera. It could be farther from your camera, as long as the drape ball is within the focus and the center of the camera, and you have consistent images. Any questions?
No, thanks. Clear. Thank you.
Okay. So the same setup for the digital scene. We have provided you with camera view files and render export presets, basically anything. Also a lighting preset. This is based on our setup, our physical sample setup. You have to modify all of these presets to match your setup. So once you have set up your physical drape ball scene and your stable camera, you have to make sure now that your browser file matches. Hi, Georgia.
Hiya.
Hiya. So now you just need to for example, go into browseware. We have provided you with the camera view. This matches our setup. Once you have your physical setup, you may have to change the angle of your camera. For example, in browseware, you may have to change your lighting settings that matches a little bit closer to your physical lighting settings. Just anything that could change, that could match as much as possible your physical setup. So this beginning process will take a little bit of time, but it's very important that you set this up. And at the beginning, you should have the physical drape ball set up, reference image here, and your digital image. When you overlay the two images in Photoshop or in other image editing software, the base of the drape ball should match. It should overlay exactly and match almost flat. So this is very important for the validation process, that you get this set up correct and that you save presets for the setup. So every image for every material that you save is always going to be the same. So the recommendation here is that you work with one white sample, one black sample, just so you can make sure that you have sufficient lighting around your physical setup, and that you set up your digital scene to match. You also want to try out one soft sample and one stiff material, a denim or a woven material, so that you make sure that your image crop is not cutting off any stiff materials in the future. So in the very beginning, you have to spend a little bit of time calibrating, making sure that your physical setup and your digital setup is correct and will work for all of your materials. Then you have to set presets or saved settings for this setup, and then you're ready to go for your validation. Any questions here? Okay. So moving on to the validation. This is the basic validation process. You have your sample. This should look very familiar to you. So you have your basic sample square. You drape it on the physical drape ball, you drape it on the digital drape ball, and then you compare the two. The only new part is the last step, validating the drape. It will be slightly different from before, but we'll go over what's new here in detail. So for the 9 centimeter drape ball, which is most likely what you all have, we will be using a 35 centimeter by 35 centimeter sample. It's the same sample size. I will say that we also now have a 12 centimeter drape ball, which is slightly bigger, and you're using a bigger sample size here, 50 centimeters. And the difference between the smaller drape ball and the bigger drape ball is that if you have more extreme materials, extremely stiff, extremely thick materials, you will get better validation results with the bigger drape ball. And this is due to simulation consistency in browseware, and also you have more material to work with in real life, so you get more of a heavier drape, so to speak. So with the 9 centimeter drape ball, you can still use most of your materials. With the 9 centimeter drape ball, you might have run into some validation issues if you are working with extreme materials, such as super stiff materials. This is ripstop kind of materials, jackets, rain jacket sort of materials, and really thick fur or boucle. These materials will have a harder time draping on the smaller drape ball. So this is just for your information. When you are draping the physical sample, it should be the same as before. With the 15 centimeter drape ball, there is a hole at the top so that you can pin the center. You can also do this with your drape ball if you like. You are still draping on the bias here. So the front should be the bias line as shown here. You are now holding the edges instead of the bias. So before, our recommendation was to hold this and drape. We now recommend that you hold the edge, the weft or the warp, in this case, the warp edge, and drop. And this is just because you might accidentally stretch the fabric. When you are draping this way, you might pull the fabric a bit and influence the drape. So just want to make sure that you are holding the edges, the straight edges of the material before you start draping. We also recommend that you drape several times, not just once, but you want to do this 3 or 4 times because you will get slightly different folds in different places, slightly different results for some materials. So it's always good to drape 2 to 5 times and have these photos as backup. Any questions here? All good. Okay. In Browseware, we are draping the digital sample also a little bit differently. The file that you will be given is something like this. It should be this with different sizes for different drape balls. For you, it would be 35 centimeters. Your initial grid for your material will be size 1. So this is just to make the simulation faster. When you start at the very beginning, your simulation time will be extremely fast. The material will fall down on the drape ball really quickly. And then you change the grid size to 0.3. Then you drape again and you get more realistic folds to your material. The reason for this is just to make it a bit more realistic. In real life, your material is dropping very fast and it's trying to make the simulation much faster. So we are draping first with grid size 1. You change the grid size and then simulate again. The same recommendation here is that you may want to drape your material several times. So here you would render an image. So export out this render and then prepare and drape this material once or twice more just to make sure that you are getting consistent results. So this should look a little bit familiar here in the validation step. First, you just want to visually check that your physical drape and your virtual drape is the same or is similar enough. You have a very big difference here, for example, and so you know immediately something is wrong. I go back and I redrape, I check my physics, something like that. If you got a pretty close match, now you can start your measurement process. So this is the new part of your validation process. This will replace all your validation template from before. Now you are using this template here. Now you will be using this, our validation template. What's required is just one reference image, one image of the physical sample, one image of the digital render, and a comparison. So I have an example here from my desktop. I'm just going to place an image into this placeholder here. So here I have my reference image. And here I'm going to put the digital drape from Browseware. Here, for example, for the validation, I will be inputting just overall width. So I take the sample into Photoshop. It doesn't matter what unit you're working with. I use pixels. You don't have to change your units here. You can use a ruler function in Photoshop and just measure the overall width. It doesn't matter the angle, as long as it's just the two widest points on the material. You record the width. Make sure you are recording the width and not the angled length. And then you would do the same for the digital image. So here I'm going to just put in the digital image. And as you can see, it matches very closely here to my physical sample. I'm just putting my digital image on top. I'm going to first measure the widest points. This is wider. My width is here, 489. And the template will automatically calculate your match percentage. In the comparison box, you just want to put the overlay here. So I'm going to set the drape layer to 70%. And then I'll save this as a new image. And that's your template. Of course, you want to change this information here and here. So the only boxes that you are filling in on this template here is these yellow boxes. You're just filling in some length, the length here, and it will automatically calculate your difference here. This initial section is required. At the bottom here, there's some space for optional views. So if you already have a setup where you are showing the top view or side views, you can place those images if you like, but these are optional. So that is the template. What I demonstrated is this entire page. And here we are looking at the tolerance. So between 0 to 10%, the material matches. Here we've got 4%, it's green, the material is matching. Between 10 to 20%, we have to make sure that we are getting a consistent result. So with your 3 to 5 additional images, you have to make additional comparisons. And for at least one comparison, if it matches, then it matches. This is just because when you drape, at least one instance of the drape matches. If For all comparisons, it's between 10 to 20%. Then the material is within tolerance. This is just to make sure that you are getting the same result every time. You are getting a consistent drape. It's always the same. If it's over 20% for at least one, then it's out of tolerance. So there's at least one instance in which the material is not matching, then we need to troubleshoot it further. So there is a little chart here that will tell you what to do if you are getting an out of tolerance or material does not match. Our first recommendation is always to redrape the material. So take more physical reference images. Sometimes your physical drape may not be the best, so you want to do it again. Second recommendation is to retake the digital image, so drape it again in V-Stitcher. And then if you are getting out of tolerance results, then you need to remeasure the material. That is the basic workflow. So this is a little bit about the physical drape. So a good physical drape is listed here, basically looks something like these. If you have a really stiff material, for example, you need to use a larger sample size. This is the recommendation from earlier, which is why we have a option of a larger drape ball, is that you can use a larger sample size and you will not have this problem with really stiff materials. We also want you to watch out for curled edges. So knit single jerseys or really thin interlocks, those edges will curl, within the environment. So the physical drape comparison is not valid when you've got curled edges. It stiffens the edges and makes the drape kind of stiffer than it should be. So in this case, we recommend you iron the material and quickly drape it. Right after ironing, the edge is flat. So actually this example here, this is a knit jersey that was had curled edges. We pressed the edges really flat and then quickly draped it so we can capture an instance of this drape while the edges are not curled. You can also create a lightweight stitch line, so a zigzag stitch or a flat stitch line on the edges to prevent it from curling, but we recommend just do a quick iron and do a drape quickly. So any questions about the validation part? Okay, no so far. Good. So I will provide you with these resources after this meeting and this recording so you can review what the process requires. And that's really it. Any overall questions? Any bigger questions?
Actually, we have a question regarding taking the picture from the top perspective. Neydi sorun burada?
Şimdi Lightbox'a sığmıyor yani kamera girmiyor kapalı olduğu için üstü. Onu açık bir alana mı çekebiliyorsun? Ben ne tavsiye ederim?
Drop'u mu?
Aynen fiziksel olarak.
Hı hı.
Nerede çekebiliriz?
How we should take a picture for the drop from the top perspective, like because the around the drop is close, değil mi? Covered, and that's why how you can advise.
For the top photo, this is no longer required. It is optional.
Opsiyonelmiş.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so you can submit 2 examples to me of the validation template if you want to verify that you are doing it correctly. At this point, Georgia is accepting both versions, both her old PVH template and this template. So you can also submit both to Georgia directly. I can review 1 or 2 examples from you if you like me to check. Or you can submit it directly to Georgia. It's up to you. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your clear presentation.
Thank you and good luck.
Thank
Let me
you.
know if you have questions. I will send you an email. Okay?
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Have a nice day.
Bye.